most important thing of all, you need to become a great communicator. Because all of what we're talking about, inviting, exposing, getting a response, helping somebody become an agent, getting them on the protection plan, getting them to fill out a contact list, getting them to training, all revolves around your ability to communicate. You got to communicate effectively. Now, communication is misunderstood. See, a lot of times people think what you say is enough. Greg, I read the script. Greg, I said what you said. That's not enough. That's only 7% of communication. So what you say, believe it or not, although important, is the least impactful. What's even more impactful is your facial expressions and body language. Now, that's obviously when you're with somebody in person. But what's even more impactful than that is your tonality. That carries the most power. And what that really means is that if you want people to engage in what you're saying, they can't just hear what you say, they have to feel what you say. People move on emotion, not logic. People justify their decisions with logic. They say things like it makes sense, but people do what they're moved to do. And they're moved by emotion. So that's tough if you're not an emotional person, if you don't have a lot of passion, if you don't have that tonality in your voice, then it's tough because people can't feel what you have to say. They only hear what you have to say. And sometimes hearing what you have to say can work, but it'll never be as impactful as when people feel what you say. And I'll give you an example. You could take the same two things and you could change it drastically by your tone, your facial expressions, and body language. Like you could say to somebody, man, you are stupid. And they would be like, you don't want to fight maybe, right? They'd be offended. They'd be taken aback. Or you could go, man, you are stupid. And they'd be like, you think so? It's the same exact words, but I changed the tone. I changed my facial expressions and body language. I changed my delivery. What makes a great comedic person when you go see a comedian, it's their delivery. It's the tone. And that's why you get sucked into a movie. Listen, you know these are paid actors, right? You go to a movie, you know they're getting paid $10 million or $20 million, and you're sitting there on the edge of your seat and you're crying or you're laughing. It's fake. You know it's a paid actor, but you're still sucked in because of the tone of their voice, their facial expression, their body language. They've got you engaged. Everybody needs that. Everybody needs that, and that comes from practicing the scripts and knowing what to say and doing it again and again and doing it in a way that evokes emotion. Because when people feel something, they're more likely to move to action than just hearing it. Very, very important right here, because it's not just what we're saying, it's how we're saying it that makes a difference. So when you ask questions, like when I'm asking somebody, what is it you're trying to get out of this? I'm asking it in a way that's caring and nurturing, and they're feeling my concern for them when they're asking. I'm not just like a robot. What are you trying to get out of this? What are you trying to get out of this? Oh, like you're in a conversation. Listen, what is it you're trying to get out of this? And that makes a difference because that's going to help them to think more and take it more seriously and feel the concern. All of that makes a huge difference in your communication. The second thing we got to get really good at in our ability to communicate is we got to shift. In most instances, in most jobs, in most other things we do, we can tell, right? We can do a lot of telling. But in our business, we can't do a lot of telling. We got to do asking. So why are we great at telling? That's how we were raised. When you think about teachers, what did they do? They told us the lessons. What was our job? As students, tell the teacher what they told us. If we do that, we get good grades. But we're going to go against that. Instead of starting our sentences with let me tell you, which is what we standardly do, let me tell you about our service. Let me tell you about why I think this would be good for you. Let me tell you why you got to go to the training. Let me tell you how exciting this is going to be. Let me tell you why this is such a powerful company. Let me tell you. That's what we tend to do. But telling is a risk because you might be telling something to somebody they don't want to hear or they don't agree with. So you're already working against yourself when you start your sentences with let me tell you. It's a risk. You're debating with people right from the get-go. Why would you do that when you don't have to? Okay, 2 simple principles that some of you have heard before, but they hold true today. They've held true for business for many, many years. Number 1, find a need and fill it. Second thing is help people get what they want, and you'll. The best way to find somebody's need is to ask them. The best way to help somebody get what they want is to ask them what they want. Telling them is not asking them. You might be telling them something they have no interest in, which is going to turn them off, which means they're not going to listen to what you have to say, even though they might, pretend like they are. People do that, right? Do you know we all have been in conversations with people that we're not paying attention to anything they're saying, right? And if you don't admit that, you're lied again. Because everybody in this room has done that. Everybody in this room has stood in front of somebody at some point in time, and I'm sure more than once, where somebody's talking and you're thinking about a bunch of other things. Because they weren't capturing your interest. That's just what happens to us. So you want to start your sentences with, let me ask you. Get in the habit of doing that. Let me ask you a question. 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 That's how you got to start your sentences now. Not, let me tell you. Let me tell you. Let me tell you. No. Let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question. You know what that guarantees? Getting someone's attention. Telling people stuff doesn't get people's attention. Let me ask you a question. Now they got to turn their attention to you. Because as soon as you say, let me ask you a question, they got to listen and pay attention. So let me ask you a question. We've got to become master askers. Now, why do we ask? That's how you get to know people. You'd be amazed how little we really know about people we're even close to. Like, we know surface things, right? We know surface things. Are they married? Do they have kids? What their job is? We know surface things. But we don't know deep things. Do we know, like, if money wasn't an issue in their life, what would they do with their life? Do we know what their plan is in 20 years from now? Or do we know what they like about what they do at their job? No. A lot of those things we don't know. We just know surface things. So we got to get to know people on a deeper level because that's what is really going to be motivating for them. Also, when you talk to people and you ask questions and you know something about them, you can set up your presentation better because you know their desires. They've told you. You know what motivates them. So you could hone in on that. If somebody's motivation is money, you can focus on money. If somebody's focus is purpose and mission and what their cause is and helping people, you focus on that. By asking questions, they're going to tell you the things that drive them, which then you can utilize in your presentation. Obviously, somebody shared some information with you. They shared what makes them who they are, and next thing you know how FES can help them achieve their goals. That's huge. And you know what else? It doesn't just help you get people in. It helps you keep people in. So once again, I go back to my team track. I got all this stuff documented. I'm writing all the stuff down when I ask all the questions that I do. I write down, what is the reason somebody got in this business? What are some of the goals that you have in your life? I have notes that I'm taking down because when I'm talking to somebody, I have all that in front of me. And I remind people quite frequently about what it is they got involved in this business for, what are their long-term goals, and also it keeps me in front of it too. Like I know what I got to be saying or encouraging them to do to get their results. Because it's easy for people to get discouraged and sidetracked and to lose focus. I want to make sure I can pull them back in. So you got to ask those questions. Very, very important. So you got 2 types of questions. The first type of question is an open-ended question. It's where you want to gather a lot of information. So what is an open-ended question? If I say to you, what do you like about what you do? It's going to be open. You're going to be able to talk as long as you want about that. What do you like about it? And when I ask a question like that, I'm going to listen. That's also going to evoke other questions out of me. Like somebody might say, what do you like about what you do? I love helping people. Oh, really? What is it about people that you really enjoy? And then I get more information. I find out things like, hey, what don't you like about what you do? That's very helpful if somebody tells you what they don't like. Because what can you do? Leave that out in terms of what FES has to offer. So whatever it is, they tell me what they don't like. So if you don't ask that question and you start talking, let's say somebody says this, you know what I don't like? I don't like sales. I don't like sales, right? But you didn't ask them that question. So back to telling. Let me tell you, man, we have the best product to sell. You don't know that they don't like sales, right? Let me tell you, man, you are going to love this company. Man, we sell the best product. And you don't like sales? Oh, in their head, they're done. They have no interest. All because you didn't ask. Versus if you asked and they said, yeah. Okay, watch how I can come back. See, I know that now. That's in here. So I find out that, hey, if money wasn't an issue in your life, what are some of the things you'd be doing? Or when it comes to your career, what are some of the specific things that are most important to you? But if somebody says, I don't like sales, and I'm in that conversation, what I'm able to say is, listen, if I could share an opportunity with you where you could help people and make a difference, but the most important thing was you had a belief in what the company offered, and you felt you could share it with others with passion. You'd be open to a business like that, wouldn't you? Oh, definitely. See? But what if somebody said to me, what do you love most about what you do? I love selling. I love to sell. Then I could turn around and say, listen, if I could share an opportunity with you that puts you in a position to sell the best product possible, where you could go out and sell your way to a fortune, you'd want to be in an opportunity like that, wouldn't you? See, I could change it up based upon the responses I'm getting. My script can adjust because of the questions I'm asking and the answers I'm getting. And that can be in anything. That is so huge in your business, whether it's working with a new prospect or whether that's working with an existing agent. I always am asking questions. That's the best way to get information. And once you get information, then you can solve problems. You can overcome objections a lot easier when you have information. And of course, what do? As I mentioned, it's a conversation. You're not interrogating people. You're having a conversation with people. And a part of that conversation is your ability to continue to ask questions to engage that person in that conversation. That's very, very important. Very helpful, very important. And that's how you'll build good relationships with people, because people like to talk about themselves. Now, important tips. Don't interrogate people, right? Don't just rapid fire ask questions. Don't have a list on a pad and go through all these questions you're going to ask, because they're going to feel like you're grilling them. That's not going to be comfortable either. So don't interrogate people. Just have a conversation with people, right? Don't interrogate, conversate. And I know, by the way, for those of you who are analytical, I know that's not a word. I know that. But we just put that up there because we can. Be a great listener. And by the way, listening is not being quiet. Listening is actually hearing what the other person has to say to the point that you have the ability to paraphrase back what they said. So if somebody says things to you, you're able to actually turn it around, take what they've said and put it back in your sentences back to them. That's important. So if somebody says, hey, as I just did, they don't like sales, I'm able to take that and turn it around, paraphrase back to them in my statements to them what they said to me. But you can only do that if you're listening, not thinking about what you're going to say next. And don't be what I call the assuminator, the interrupter, the guesser, or the one-upter. These are all villains, by the way, of the master asker. That's another character at the Big Show, by the way, the master asker, which is a superhero, because you can accomplish a lot with a question. If you turn a question mark upside down, what is it? It's a hook. And that's what a question does. It hooks people into paying attention. It's powerful. It's a superhero, but you got all these villains you're up against. The assuminator. We've all had people who've interrupted us and guessed our answers and for us. And we all know who the one-upter is, right? The person that every time you tell them you've done something, they've done something better, right? Man, I just got a new puppy. That's cool. I got 2 dogs. Yeah, they're awesome. My dogs are the best. Oh, that's good. Man, sorry I was late this morning. I had to stop by. There was a kid. A ball went in the street. I had to stop and help him. He goes, really? Well, on my way in this morning, I ran into a burning building, pulled out 2 kids. It's like, jeez, man. That isn't a good way to build a good relationship, by the way, okay? Listening is a good way to build a relationship because nobody ever listens to anybody anymore, so they value that. People value when people actually will listen to them, and that's important in this business for sure. What's the second kind of question? Because there are 2. You have that open-ended question, and then you have a closed-ended question. Or we like to use the statement, we call it a tie-down. And basically what that is doing is that is taking your statements and making them into a question so you can get a response from somebody. And it may not be a verbal response. It may only be a nod of a head, or maybe inside their own head they're just going, yep, I agree with that. And we do that all the time at the presentations, and that's something to get in the habit of. For instance, you might be talking about the protection plan. You might say something like, look, everybody would want to protect their family, wouldn't they? See, nobody's going to say no to that. That's going to cause them to say yes. Wouldn't they? Yes. This is a great opportunity, isn't it? Yes. You want to be at the top of the compensation By getting people to constantly nod and agree and say yes, they're more likely to then take advantage of the opportunity, because when somebody says yes over and over and over and over and over again, they're eventually going to say yes to the value of what you're offering. So that's big. So you're turning your statements into closing questions. And this causes people to give an affirmative response. You take your sentences and you use words like wouldn't you, couldn't we, aren't I, isn't it, haven't they, all those kinds of endings. And that will put you in a position to get people to start answer affirmative. And I'm doing it all the time, aren't I? I just did it right there, didn't I? I can't help it. It just pours out of me all the time, doesn't it? Oh gosh, can you stop it? But what it does is get people to agree and nod your head, and now they're with you. I do that all the time. You're with me, aren't you? Yeah. Because it makes sense, doesn't it? Absolutely. And if you practice this and do it enough, it'll start to make more sense and you'll become good at it, won't you? Yeah, no question. Yeah. And the better you get, the more opportunity you'll have, the more money you'll make. And you want that, don't you? Exactly. I knew you were with me. And you knew it too, didn't you? That's what you got to do. So when you think about examples, listen, when you're talking to people, listen, everyone needs a protection plan, don't they? So that's what I'm doing. When I'm talking to a customer, I'm using those things. When I'm talking to a prospect, I'm using those things. So I'm talking to a customer and they want to get their credit worked on. I'm saying, this is going to help. You can see that, can't you? Yeah. See, I'm getting those yeses. I'm getting them to stay focused because I'm asking them questions. Remember, that question is a hook, and it keeps them engaged, and it gets them to respond. I'm getting a positive response. It's a positive experience. And you know what's great about all this? We're doing it all for them, aren't we? If somebody gets in this business and it helps their life, we've helped them to have a better way of life, haven't we? Exactly. If we help somebody sign up for a service and their credit goes through the roof, it's awesome for them, isn't it? Yes. So it's a great thing to utilize. And you're going to start utilizing this immediately, aren't you? Exactly. The compensation plan's amazing, isn't it? You want to put yourself in a position to be successful, don't you? All of that kind of stuff is what I'm utilizing to get people to see the value. Let me ask you a question. This is what you got to get down as I'm doing it. So I start out. Let me ask you a question. If you wanted to be a doctor, you'd go to medical school, wouldn't you? What would they say to that? Yeah, of course. Great. And if you wanted to be great at FES, it would make sense to go to the training, which helps you to be like a successful doctor, only in FES. It makes sense to go to the training here then, wouldn't it? Yeah, great. So let's get you on the computer and sign you up because we got to get you going so you could be successful. And you want that, don't you? Yep. Okay, good. You're definitely going to attend FES's annual convention, aren't you? Yes. Absolutely. Yes, you are. Now, here's the thing. All of what we're teaching, and I can't emphasize this enough, and I think people don't do this more than any other thing. They don't do this, and that's practice. You got to role play and you got to practice. This stuff that I'm doing up here, you know how many years of practice I put into this? It's not like I was born with tie downs. I didn't know any of this stuff either. Once I learned it, and again, I followed. Remember, they told me to walk like this. I walk like this. It doesn't matter. They tell me to practice and role play. You know what I did? Practice and role play. I got to get really good. But it's the same thing with everything. I grew up playing basketball. And the only way you could get good is practice. You got to practice. So people look at when you do things and play sports, and they're amazed by it. But they don't look at all of what it took to get really good. And you got to practice and role play. Because if you don't practice and role play, you're not going to be good at tie downs, which means either A, you're not going to use them at all, which is going to mean you're going to be less effective, or you're going to try to use them without practice, and it's going to come across terrible. Because you can't talk to somebody and say, man, this is incredible. Isn't it? Because somebody's going to be like, why are you talking like that? It's not going to be smooth. It's not going to be natural. It's going to be forced. And they're going to know. So you don't want them to know. You want them to just be participating. It's just a natural way you communicate and talk to people. Got to practice. You got to practice. You got to practice. You got to role play. A great exercise to do is just get with another agent and practice with them and go back and forth. And every statement has to end with a tie down. It's just like what I was doing with you right here as I'm going through it. I'm going through and I'm using a